moments ago, the Trump administration filing a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court asking it to review the Court of Appeals order in the Judge Boasberg case on the deportations of suspected Venezuelan gang members. This has been one of, if not the biggest legal matter that they've been hashing out in the courts, though how can you really choose? And Trump lost on Wednesday with a divided D.C. Circuit 3-judge panel. A Trump-appointed judge would have sided with the administration. An Obama-appointed judge sided with the ACLU. And the splitter was an H.W. Bush appointee who sided with the Obama judge and said, you can't use the Alien Enemies Act to just deport a bunch of people. Now, here's what's interesting. So they're asking the Supreme Court for immediate review because right now what's happening is Judge Boasberg's order halting these deportations stands. So the Trump policy has effectively been shut down until we get a final ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court on this. And, there's been no real evidentiary hearing. Trump is in there saying, no, the policy should be allowed to go forward until we have our final order. This is wrong. Okay, so we'll find out what the Supreme Court does. But as this happens, a very interesting piece in the news this morning. Okay, it was, do you have it, Abby? All right, now, I don't think that's it. Hold on, stand by. Okay, I've got it. Sorry, I have so much paper. This is all stuff we're going to be getting to, so buckle up. The question is whether the Alien Enemies Act can be used by a president when it's not technically a time of war, meaning war hasn't been declared by Congress, but the president has used other language from the Alien Enemies Act to declare an invasion or an incursion. Now, Judge Boasberg was not convinced that a president can do that by proclamation and that if he can, it's an appropriate circumstance here. And the Court of Appeals agreed with Judge Boasberg on those points. They're not convinced that this is an incursion or an invasion as those terms would typically be used. Enter this piece today. It's posted on Real Clear Politics. It's by Bart Marquis, C-O-I-S. And he makes the strong case based on another piece of journalism he had witnessed that Tren de Aragua is indeed, it qualifies as a military incursion that's been unleashed on us by the Venezuelan government. And he goes through it in great detail, guys. He says, there was an extraordinary article last week by Miami Herald investigative reporter Antonio Maria Delgado. And Delgado interviewed a team of high-level investigators and analysts who had been following the Venezuelan regime for over 10 years. The only team member to speak on the record was Gary Berntsen, among the most highly decorated CIA veterans in recent history. The author here spoke with Berntsen as well. He confirmed that Tren de Aragua was purposefully sent into the U.S. to destabilize our country by the Venezuelan government. Quoting Berntsen here, the Venezuelan regime has assumed operational control of these guys, Tren de Aragua, and has trained 300 of them. They have given them paramilitary training them to fire weapons and how to conduct sabotage. They have given them all a 4 to 6 week course. They put these 300 guys through that course, and then they were deploying them into the United States to 20 separate states. The Berntsen confirming to the author here that sabotage includes arson, taking a look at the LA wildfires, the cause of which we still have not yet determined, and so on. The CIA, he says, doesn't have this information, according to Berntsen, because they refused to look at it. We tried to brief them about this 3 years ago. They were directed by the Biden administration to ignore it. And now those officials are trying to undermine President Trump, who listened. I have to tell you, as a lawyer, this is a very important addendum to this argument. And if they can just get a hearing in front of this court to justify Trump's declaration of invasion or incursion, I'll start with you, Anna Spicer, it could be a game changer.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that. I'm sure as a lawyer, you know the case I'm going to cite, Common Sense versus Nut Job, where it very clearly, the court the court ruled that you shouldn't have to argue that hard to get known gang members out of a country who came here illegally. I mean, this is on its face an insane idea that a president of the United States has to go all the way to the Supreme Court to argue that people who are known gang members coming illegally into the country have to go through some serious process to get sent back. I believe the court will side with President Trump, but I think it's sad that we actually had to go to this level to do it.
Mm-hmm. This clearly has the support, I think, of most Americans. The deportation plan in general, Mark, has the support of most Americans. Maybe they've got some questions on Turrentine or Aragua, but if so, that hasn't manifested in any polls I've seen. I think, the more dangerous the potential illegals are, the more Americans want them gone. But you tell me how you see it, because as a legal matter, it's tricky, but I think Trump's in the right. But the biggest matter will be politically. If the Supreme Court doesn't uphold the D.C. Circuit and allows Trump to do this, how does it play? Yeah. And if they don't allow Trump to do this, how does it play?
Well, in common sense versus nut job, there's always in the law, right? There's always ambiguity, and we don't know how any of these judges or justices will rule. When you add in the overlay of politics, it becomes more complicated. I think there's two important things here. One, you've illuminated, which is super important, which is the actual facts. If those facts are true, you'd have to make it akin to the president striking the Houthis. No federal judge is going to say, I'm enjoining the president from striking the Houthis, because this is, for most Americans, and as a practical matter, it's every bit as urgent a war, in some ways more urgent, because it's right here at home, than the president trying to clear up the shipping lanes in the Middle East. So number one, the facts matter. And if those facts are close to true, he should be unshackled to do this. And these district court judges, I think, should show some humility about what they're interfering with and stop acting like this isn't urgent. Number two, as someone who had federal litigation that lasted 20 years, I know full well how slow the wheels of justice grind. In this case, I urge every district court judge, every appellate judge, every Supreme Court justice to think about these cases and not treat them all like they're on the same conveyor belt of slow molasses moving. This one should get expedited and ruled on, so the president can deal with not just fulfilling a campaign promise, but dealing with something that's threatening the life and liberty and property of Americans, which is, yes, akin to a war.
Here's how the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals saw it, Dan. They said, we understand that the government is arguing that we've had these unwanted illegals come into the country unlawfully, and you're calling it an invasion or an incursion. But the court said those terms, as used in the statute, must be considered in their military sense. Now, already, as a lawyer, I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. Who has the ultimate say on military calls? It's the commander in chief. It's not Judge Boasberg. And it's not even the U.S. Supreme Court. And if you read the terms of the Alien Enemies Act, it specifically says that. I mean, the Supreme Court's already said we don't have jurisdiction to review commander-in-chief calls under this, but under very limited circumstances, they can review a couple of pieces of it. So in any event, that's what they said, first of all. Those terms, invaded or incursion, has to be considered in the military sense. And then they go on to say, okay, these words in the statute must be read to mean, quote, a hostile encroachment by a nation state, and concluded that these conditions do not exist because we haven't had a hostile encroachment by a nation state. Now, if this stuff about Trenda Aragua is true, that's a very different story. And Judge Boasberg had no right to shut down the commander-in-chief's call on this just with his pen. He hasn't had an evidentiary hearing at all. He shut it down saying, I believe they're going to win. And the D.C. Circuit Court said, yeah, us too. And now if the Supreme Court doesn't step in, this whole policy could be shut down, even though the Venezuelans really may be trying to send an incursion into the United States because Judge Boasberg thinks he knows better.
Look, Democrats should not ever be on the side of criminals who are illegal immigrants. And I think the issue of immigration has bedeviled the party now for the last, 8 or 9 years. And I think to Sean's point, we have been on the wrong side of common sense issues the last couple months. And so I think the party's probably best path here is to support the crackdown on criminal illegal immigrants and just say, look, the justice system should work this out. We have rules and processes in place. Let's let it work its way, but not try to kind of like spike the football and look like we are on the side of protecting criminal illegal immigrants. It is in everyone's interest to get them off the streets. To Mark's point, poll after poll, here where I live in New York City, down in DC, they had the big arrest earlier this week. MS-13 has been terrorizing parts of DC where a lot of Democrats live for the last 10 years. And so where they're doing this, we should applaud Trump's efforts to try to clean up the streets and make America safer.
Megyn, if I can real quick, this is a win-win politically for President Trump. Yep. If the Supreme Court, which I believe it will, rule in his favor for all of the reasons that you kind of enumerated there, then it's a political win. If by chance the court at the highest level rules against him, I think at least on the MAGA base side, and I think for a lot of independents, after the 4 years that we were gaslit and told that there was no problem with immigration, that the border was sealed, that criminals weren't coming in, they'll give President Trump credit for fighting. And so, this to him is a perfect issue because there is no downside. There's a downside for the country. If the court rules against us, God forbid they make us bring criminals back into the country. But at the end of the day, I think this is one of those ones where if you're President Trump leading this, to Dan's point, you've put Democrats in a trap. They either have to side with you or with the criminals.
You don't go out and buy a life jacket when the boat's already sinking, and you don't buy gold when the economy's already collapsed. Clearly, others are heeding this advice as gold hit all-time highs already this year. It's not too late for you, and you could have Birch Gold help you diversify into physical gold. Birch Gold specializes in helping you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA and physical gold for no money out of pocket. One recent 5-star review said Birch Gold was, quote, knowledgeable, helpful, non-pressure. Get your free info kit on gold by texting the letters MK to the number 989898. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, just text MK to 989898 and let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.